No one in the galaxy expected humanity to survive the siege of Varos 9. Hell, most of the Council's strategists didn't expect us to last a week. The Drak'Hal Empire, scaled titans, bred in volcanic worlds and worshipped as demigods by half the Outer Rim, had already crushed 7 intelligent species in a single century. And now they set their eyes on us. The great galactic observers predicted we'd do as humans always did: panic, negotiate, collapse, surrender, repeat. The typical script. But the observers had never actually met a human, not the kind that crawled out of gravity wells with cracked helmets and broken ribs screaming. Round 2! They had definitely never met one like the kid. Her name was Mara Quinn. 8 years old. Barely tall enough to see over a tactical console. And the entire galaxy would soon know her as the child who kissed a living apocalypse. The war began ugly. No speeches. No declarations. No flashing banners or ceremonial posturing. Just a black sky splitting open as the Drak'Hal world breaker, Skorgath the Eternal, descended like a star collapsing into itself. A beast the size of a skyscraper, armored in volcanic plating, crowned with horns sharp enough to slice a cruiser in half. A creature intelligent enough to command entire battle fleets and cruel enough to enjoy doing it personally. Skorgath didn't just rule the Drak'Hal, he was their monster king. When he arrived on Varos 9, everyone thought humanity would throw nukes, rail guns, or plasma spears. But no one expected what came next. The Drak'Hal stormed the colony. The ground shook under their armored march. Civilians were herded toward the bunker complexes while soldiers bought time with bullets, mortars, and their own lives. It would have been a massacre, a total one-sided slaughter. If not for Mara. She slipped away from the evacuation lines the way children often do, curious, brave, convinced they were helping even when the adults screamed at them not to. No one noticed her tiny boots treading across the cracked red soil, heading straight toward the monster king who had just reduced a platoon to molten ash. The Marines saw her too late. "Kid! Back! Back! Get her out of there! Jesus, someone tackle her!" But Skorgath saw her first. The enormous Dragon Lord turned, smoke breathing through his fanged jaws, eyes burning bright like molten gold. A titan, a living tank? The ultimate executioner of species. Mara stopped in front of him. Everyone froze, humans and Drak'Hal alike, expecting her to faint, cry, or die. Instead, she tilted her head and said, "Are you sad?" And the battlefield went silent. Humans already had a reputation for insanity across the star lanes, but this was new. A child staring down a god beast who just killed dozens of soldiers, and asking him if he was sad. Skorgath's huge claw reached forward. Every rifle locked onto him. Every Marine braced to fire. He didn't strike. He didn't roast her. He didn't even roar. He hesitated. And for a creature whose entire religion revolved around conquest, hesitation was blasphemy. The Drak'Hal watched in confusion. Humans watched in terror. Even the automated defense drones held fire, unsure how to process what they were seeing. Mara stepped forward, lifted her small hand, and placed it gently on the Titan's obsidian-scaled snout. A whisper of warmth. A touch softer than battle dust. A moment that broke every war protocol ever written. Skorgath inhaled sharply, as if electrocuted. No human weapon had ever made the Monster King flinch. But the child did. "Your heart hurts," she said simply. No translator. No armor. Just raw human empathy thrown like a grenade into an empire built on fear. Skorgath jerked his head away as if stunned. His massive wings unfurled. The ground quaked. And then, the moment that would echo across the next century took place. Mara leaned forward and kissed the dragon on the nose. A human child. Kissing the deadliest creature in the galaxy. In the middle of a war zone. Every alien recorder in orbit glitched. Every political faction screamed. Every Drak'Hal soldier nearly dropped their weapon. Even Skorgath froze. A living mountain suddenly turned to stone. It wasn't magic. It wasn't prophecy. It wasn't destiny. It was humanity doing what humanity did best, something completely, absurdly, suicidally unexpected. For a brief second, no one moved. Then the Marines opened fire. Not out of malice, out of panic, training, desperation. They thought the child was about to die. They thought the war could be saved only by killing the Monster King while he was distracted. The air lit up with plasma bolts, railgun bursts, and sonic rounds. They hit Skorgath like flicked pebbles. He didn't attack Mara. He didn't crush the soldiers. He simply spread his wings, released a guttural roar, and vanished into the clouds. Retreating. The first and only documented Dragon King retreat in Drakkhall history. Mara blinked. "Did I do something bad?" she asked. No answer came. Just the distant rumble of the Monster King fleeing, confused and shaken. Command lost its collective mind. The Council's eyes went wide. Human generals argued until tables flipped. Every intelligence agency demanded explanations. A child had just broken the psychological armor of the most terrifying warlord in the known universe, not with weapons, not with strategy, but with something no species had ever dared to use in warfare. Compassion. And the Drakkhall? They were furious. To them, Skorgath was not just defeated, he was humiliated. The worst possible crime for their culture. What happened next would ignite the darkest chapter of the war, one dripping with vengeance, political betrayal, and a revelation about the Monster King that would shake even the hardest human soldiers. Mara had touched something inside Skorgath, and the galaxy had no idea what it had just awakened. Skorgath did not fly straight back to his flagship. Instead, he vanished into the ash storms of Varos 9's upper atmosphere, circling, trembling, trying to process a sensation he had not felt in over 2 centuries. A gentle touch. A kiss. Not a ceremonial greeting, not a battle ritual, not a submission gesture, but something he remembered from a life he had buried long before he became the Monster King. And that memory terrified him. For the Drakkhall Empire, emotions were weapons. To show softness was equivalent to slicing open your own throat. Their culture was forged on the belief that compassion kills faster than blades. Yet there he was, a titan of war, shaking because a human child had pressed her lips against his snout. He snarled at the clouds, trying to regain control, but the memory only sharpened. A tiny hand scaled like his own. A child he once protected. A child lost to an ancient betrayal within the Drakkhall court. Mara's touch had ripped open the wound. No, not a wound. A scar. Back at the human stronghold, things were tense. Command wanted answers. Journalists wanted the footage. Armchair admirals wanted Skorgath nuked into an 8th dimension. General Arlen Burke, a man who looked carved from old earth granite and kept a bottle of painkillers in every pocket, slammed his fist onto the briefing table. "We are not," he growled, "and I repeat, not making send children to kiss the enemy an official tactic." The room erupted into muttered laughter, relief, and a few nervous coughs. But his expression didn't soften. "We need to understand what happened," Burke continued. "Skorgath doesn't retreat. Ever. If this was a trick..." "It wasn't," Mara said from the corner. Everyone turned. She sat on a crate swinging her legs, a blanket wrapped around her like a very small soldier. Burke crouched in front of her, voice softening in a way that startled the entire command staff. "Mara, why did you walk up to the most dangerous creature in the galaxy?" She blinked up at him. "Because he was crying." The room froze. Burke cleared his throat. "Skorgath was crying?" "Inside," Mara said. "Like Daddy did before he..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Burke gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "All right, kiddo. That's enough." He turned back to the table. "Ladies and gentlemen, we need a new playbook." The Drakkhall Empire was boiling. Skorgath's retreat had spread like wildfire. To them, withdrawing was worse than death. It was cultural annihilation. Every officer demanded answers. Every general wanted blood. Every zealot screamed for the Monster King to prove he had not gone soft. The pressure mounted until even the stone pillars of the Drakehall throne chamber seemed to vibrate with fury. High Chancellor Vrax, skeletal and venom-eyed, struck the war gong with his staff. "The galaxy watches us bleed shame," he hissed. "Our king faltered before a human whelp. This insult must be purged. Burn their worlds. Crush their colonies. Bring us the child's head." The chamber roared in agreement. But Skorgath didn't. He stalked forward, towering over everyone, smoke hissing from his jaws. "No one," he rumbled, "touches the child." A death sentence spoken aloud? The chamber fell silent. Even Vrax froze, his venomous confidence curdling. "This is treason," Vrax spat. "Compassion is corruption. Corruption is rot. And rot must be cut out." Skorgath lowered his head until the Chancellor could see his own reflection in the Monster King's molten eyes. "If you approach her," Skorgath growled, "I will peel the flesh from your bones and use it for armor." That was the moment the Drakehall Empire shattered into two factions. Those loyal to the Monster King, and those loyal to the old laws. Civil war was no longer an if. It was a spark already smoldering. Meanwhile, humanity was preparing for round two. General Burke and his staff worked through the night, forming what would later be called the Varos Gambit. It was part diplomacy, part psychological warfare, part pure human madness. But before they could set it in motion, the sky split open. Drakehall's ships. Hundreds. A spear of fire descending straight toward the human base. Burke shouted into comms. "All batteries, track! Railguns at full charge! Marines!" He stopped. Because the ships weren't firing. They were falling. Burning. Smoking. Spiraling out of control. The first one slammed into the side of a mountain, erupting like a sunburst. The second crashed into the desert. The third disintegrated mid-air. It wasn't an attack. It was an execution. Someone was wiping out Drakehall vessels, from the inside. Burke whispered, "What the hell is going on?" The answer arrived in the form of a sonic boom. Skorgath landed like a meteor in front of the human fortress, wings folding like black steel. His scales were scorched, his breathing ragged, and fresh wounds bled magma-laced ichor. He wasn't here to destroy the humans. He was fleeing something worse. Marines raised their weapons. Burke raised his hand. "Stand down." Skorgath lowered himself, bringing his massive head level with the human general. "They come," he rumbled. "Who?" Burke asked. "My own," Skorgath answered. "Those who believe compassion is weakness. They burn my loyalists, my fleets, my blood. They seek the child." His voice cracked. "Because she reminded me of someone I failed to protect." Burke stared into those molten eyes and saw, not a warlord, not a monster, but a father grieving for a ghost. "And you came to us for help?" Burke asked. "No," Skorgath growled. "I came to protect her." Behind Burke, Mara peeked out from behind a barricade. Skorgath froze again. Softened again. The unthinkable happened again. A Drakehall Titan, kneeling before a human child. And then the alarms began to wail. The rebel Drakehall fleet had arrived. The civil war had followed him to Varos 9. And humanity was now caught in the middle. The sky over Varos 9 warped into a curtain of fire. Dozens of Drakehall warships, sleeker, darker, and far more brutal in design than Skorgath's, dropped out of hyperspace like fanged shadows tearing through reality itself. "Those aren't standard Drakehall craft," General Burke muttered. "No," Skorgath growled. "They are purifiers. The old religious guard. They serve only the law of Ash. They kill anything that shows mercy." "Including you?" Burke asked. Skorgath's wings unfolded, blocking the desert wind like two armored shields. "They believe mercy spreads like infection. They intend to cauterize me, and your entire species." The first purifier vessel began its descent, nose down, engines screaming, and its superheated cannons lit the dusk with molten white. Burke didn't hesitate. All anti-air, fire! Bring it down! Railguns screamed. Plasma lances roared. Missile towers spat streaks of fire into the sky. The first Purifier's ship took the hit dead center, sheared in half, and collapsed into a wall of flame, impact tremors rocking the base. But a dozen more followed. Inside the bunker, Mara sat quietly on a crate, hugging her knees. A young medic knelt beside her. Hey kid, everything okay? Mara nodded slowly. He's scared. Skorgath? The medic asked, trying not to sound like she was losing her mind. He doesn't seem like the scared type. He is, Mara whispered. His heart hurts again. Outside, the earth shook with the thunder of war. Inside, the child closed her eyes as though listening to a song only she could hear. When she opened them again, she whispered something that made the medic's blood run cold. They're going to kill him! On the surface, Skorgath leapt into the air as if launched by the wrath of a dying star. His wings snapped open with a sound like cracking steel plates. He met the incoming Purifier dropships head-on. The Marines watched in awe as the Monster King tore through the sky, ripping a dropship from midair, hurling it into another, then roaring flame shot magma into a swarm of Purifier fighters. Holy! Is he helping us? General, the dragon's fighting for us! Burke kept his binoculars steady. Not for us, he murmured. For her. Skorgath slammed into the largest Purifier gunship, punched his talons through its hull, and ripped out the glowing antimatter core with his bare claws. Then he hurled it into a cluster of Purifier vessels. The explosion turned the clouds white. For a moment, the battlefield went silent. Then the Purifiers responded. A dark shape peeled from the flagship, sleek, angular, covered in ritual scar etchings. At its prow stood High Prelate Cawthron, the zealot warlord who had once served beside Skorgath, before he betrayed him. Cawthron's voice echoed from ship-wide loudspeakers, guttural and venomous. Skorgath the traitor! Your corruption ends now. Skorgath landed hard, claws skidding across the scorched ground. Cawthron! He snarled. Coward! Usurper! Grave thief! The prelate leapt from his ship, landing with a quake that shattered a dozen stones. Cawthron was smaller than Skorgath, but built like living armor, denser, sharper, faster. His scales were blackened from ritual burns, each one etched with ancient laws and molten silver. You protected the human spawn, Cawthron spat. You kneeled to empathy. You are rot. And you, Skorgath rumbled, killed my daughter. The battlefield froze. Every human soldier stiffened. Even Burke blinked. Cawthron tilted his head mockingly. She was weak. She deserved purification. Skorgath's roar cracked the sky. It wasn't the roar of a king. It wasn't the roar of a warrior. It was the roar of a parent. The two titans charged. Their collision flattened a forward bunker. Shockwaves blasted Marines backward. Even the Purifier's ships drifted from the impact turbulence. Cawthron slashed first, silver claws slicing across Skorgath's chest and sending magma blood splattering onto the sand. Skorgath retaliated by smashing Cawthron with his wing, sending the prelate tumbling across the ground in a shower of obsidian shards. Humans scrambled for cover. General! They're going to level the base! They'll kill us before the Purifiers do! Burke clenched his jaw. So we get her out. He sprinted toward the bunker. Inside, Mara sat still. Too still. Burke lifted her into his arms. We need to move, sweetheart. We're evacuating the east line. She tugged on his collar. Put me down. Can't do that. Put me down, General. He froze. She had never used his title before. Her eyes were calm. Unshaking. The dragon's dying, she whispered. He thinks he deserves it. He thinks he failed. Burke's voice cracked. Mara, listen to me. We can't get involved in. But she was already running. Mara! No! Cawthron pinned Skorgath against a broken gun tower, claws buried deep into his ribs. You shame us, Cawthron hissed. You shame our blood. You shame your dead. Skorgath struggled for breath, molten blood pouring from his wounds. I will not let you hurt the child. You cannot stop me. Cawthon raised his silver-etched claws for the killing blow. And that's when Mara stepped between them. A child. Barefooted. Staring up at a monster who could split a mountain. Cawthon blinked. What is this? Skorgath roared, pure terror in his voice. Mara, run! But she didn't. She walked forward and put her hand on Cawthon's chest. You're hurting too, she whispered. Cawthon staggered back as though she had stabbed him. Impossible, he rasped. You cannot. She tilted her head. Why are you angry? Cawthon's muscles locked. His claws trembled. Because Mercy destroyed us, he said, voice cracking like old stone. Because Mercy made us weak. Because your people killed our worlds. Mara shook her head. Not Mercy. Hate did that. Cawthon froze. The Purifier fleet ceased fire. Human guns lowered. The whole war paused around one tiny girl. Even Skorgath stared, more afraid now than when he was dying. Mara looked up at Cawthon with a softness the galaxy had forgotten existed. You don't have to be hurt anymore, she said. Then she did the impossible. She stepped forward and hugged him. The world stopped. Skorgath gasped. Cawthon's claws dropped limp. And every soldier on both sides felt something they could not explain twist inside their chest. A moment later, Cawthon stumbled backward, as if struck by a memory he'd buried a lifetime ago. A child. His child. Burned in the early wars. A grief he had drowned in rage. Suddenly he was not a zealot. Not a warlord. Just a grieving father wrapped in armor of hate. Behind him, the Purifier fleet blinked in confusion. Behind her, the human lions held their breath. And Skorgath, wounded, bleeding, terrified, rose weakly to his feet. For the first time in centuries, 2 Drakthal warlords were crying. Because of a child. A human child. But the moment couldn't last. Something darker was coming. Something neither Skorgath nor Cawthon had spoken of. And its shadow was already falling over Varos 9. The sky dimmed, not from smoke, not from clouds, but from something colossal blotting out the sun. General Burke looked up, breath hitching. What in God's black beard is that? Even Skorgath froze, wounds dripping molten blood as he stared upward with a terror no human had ever seen on a Drakthal king. Cawthon whispered a single word. The God Engine. A machine older than the Drakthal Empire. Older than their religion. Older than any known civilization. The Purifiers had awakened it. It descended like a floating tomb, kilometers wide, shaped like a jagged obsidian ring rotating around a burning purple core. Its surface crawled with symbols no species had decoded, each sigil pulsed like a heartbeat. Burke muttered, Someone want to tell me why every hair on my body just stood up? Skorgath answered without looking away. It was built by our ancestors during the First War. A weapon of last resort. No conscience. No master. No restraint. Cawthon's voice trembled, an unfamiliar sound from a zealot. We were never meant to awaken it. The God Engine activated. All sound vanished. A sphere of violet energy rippled outward. Every ship, human and Drakthal, flickered like candles caught in a storm. Electronics shorted. Ammunition detonated in their magazines. Marines clamped their hands over their ears, faces contorting in agony. Even the air seemed to shiver. Burke grabbed a comm unit. Status report. What the hell is happening? Static. Only static. Skorgath staggered, claws digging trenches in the scorched earth. It is wiping the battlefield clean, he snarled. Purifying everything. Life. Machines. Souls. Cawthon dropped to one knee. It will kill us all. And then Mara stepped forward. Let me talk to it. Burke nearly swallowed his own tongue. No. Absolutely, no. But Skorgath lowered his massive head, eyes molten with fear. She is the only one it might listen to. Are you insane? Burke roared. Cawthon placed a clawed hand on the general's shoulder, a gesture so bizarre Burke didn't even flinch. The child carries something we thought extinct, Cawthon murmured. Mercy. Innocence. Purity. The God engine was built to judge hearts, and we Drakehall have none left. Burke stared at Mara. Kid, this world's ending. Don't make me lose you too. Mara smiled sadly. You won't. And she walked toward the machine that could erase planets. The God engine's core flared. Lightning crawled across its rotating ring. A beam of violet light descended, straight toward her. Scorgath and Cawthon roared in unison. But Mara didn't stop. She lifted her face into the beam. And the machine hesitated. It scanned her. Light spiraled around her body like ribbons. Her hair floated upward as the energy wrapped around her small frame. The battlefield held its breath. Cawthon whispered. The engine is reading her grief. Scorgath murmured. And her courage. Burke pounded on the bunker door behind him. Come on, hold together, kid. The God engine's light shifted. Purple to blue. Blue to gold. Then, a voice echoed across the sky. Not a voice of sound. A voice of thought. Child. Heart untouched by ash. What do you seek? Mara answered softly. Please stop hurting everyone. The God engine rumbled. It processed. Analyzed. Judged. War is failure. Anger is contamination. Life is corruption. Mara shook her head. No. Hate is corruption. The machine paused again. Your people wage war. They're scared. The Drakehall burn worlds. They're hurting. The God engine's rotating ring slowed. Its core flickered. Explain. Mara placed her hands together like she was warming them by a campfire. When someone hurts, they make others hurt. And then those people hurt others. And then everyone is hurting so much that they stop remembering how to be warm. The God engine's aura dimmed, almost hesitant. Warm? Mara smiled. You know, like a hug. A silence fell over the battlefield. A silence so deep even the air stopped moving. And then, the God engine trembled. Its rings glowed bright gold. And it asked the question that would change history. May I have one? Scorgath choked on a breath. Cawthon stared as though witnessing the birth of a galaxy. Mara stepped forward, wrapped her arms around the machine's energy core, and hugged a weapon of mass extinction. The God engine's golden light expanded, gently this time, like warm sunlight spreading over frost. Its weapons powered down. Its rings slowed. Its hum softened. Then, softly, impossibly, it said, Thank you. The machine lifted upward, higher, higher, until it drifted back into the sky like a redeemed titan finally allowed to sleep. And it vanished. Just like that. The battlefield was silent. The war paused. The Drakehall stood frozen. Human soldiers stared at the girl who had just saved every species present. Then Scorgath collapsed. Mara! He bellowed, dragging his bleeding bulk toward her. Are you hurt? She shook her head and touched his snout again. You're warm now. The Dragon King closed his eyes. Cawthon approached, shoulders heavy, voice thick. Child, you have ended a cycle of death older than your species. Mara shrugged. I just gave hugs. Burke cleared his throat, wiping his face with a trembling hand. I need about 6 whiskeys and 12 years of therapy. The Drakehall looked at him. Burke raised his hands. Not for her. For me. Even Cawthon snorted, a sound halfway between a growl and a confused laugh. That day became legend. The Purifier fleet withdrew. Cawthon surrendered his zealotry. Scorgath swore an oath that chilled the bones of every galactic diplomat. To this child I pledge my life. She is under my protection. Forever. Humanity and the Drakehall negotiated peace, not through treaties, but through the shared realization that their children were suffering the same ancient wounds. And Mara? She became a symbol. Not of power. Not of war. But of something the galaxy had forgotten. The terrifying, universe-shaking force of human compassion. Years later, travelers told a story of a battlefield where a human child tamed a dragon king, healed a zealot, and hugged a god. A story that proved something no alien empire ever believed before. Sometimes the scariest thing humans bring to war is love.